So we're a vision AI technology company, which is a fancy word, but basically,
That sounds like a bunch of buzzwords. What, Henrik?
exactly.
What does that
I
mean?
hate
What
that.
does it
Yeah,
mean?
I hate that.
The
But
marketing
basically,
team came up with that. So
yeah,
what
exactly.
is Powerhouse?
So basically, very very high level, what Vision AI does specifically for us is that our application kind of lets you see and understand pictures or videos that you take with your phone or with your Zebra scanner or with your Honeywell scanner, right? And
Mm.
it kind of works like the way the humans do, so that you take a photo and then you analyze it and you make sense of that information that you're capturing. And what's the AI kind of comes into play is that it's constantly learning, right? And it gets better over
Mm.
time.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Wording, and it's my pleasure to have Henrik, is it Bergsager?
It's Bergsager. Good pronunciation.
Bergsager. Thank you. Yeah, no, he's a CRO at Powerhouse AI. Henrik, welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, Thomas. I really appreciate it. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time, man. So you and I were talking a little bit, off the cuff here before we jumped in, and you have a really kind of interesting and unique background, and you haven't really been in the freight space as much. So why don't we kick things off kind of relatively quickly and jump right into who you are and how, like, kind of what your background is and what kind of led you to the freight space.
Yeah. So I've been in the freight space now for about 9 months. So still
Wow.
early days. Yeah.
Yeah.
And before that, I was in manufacturing or manufacturing tech. So I work with
Mm.
an MRP platform, and that kind of led me to the company that I'm currently at, because we were focusing on inventory and inventory management through the MRP platform. And
Mm.
what I kind of discovered when we were working with different companies, there's a lot of potential when it comes to vision AI kind of technology, like being able to do cycle count by just taking a photo and feeding that into your WMS system or your inventory system, like an ERP or something. And
Yeah.
I came across Powerhouse AI, and they were doing a lot of interesting things, and it's just the way they can kind of compact technology and make it available on a device that could run offline, and then you can cross-reference a bunch of different data points. Right, that's pretty neat. So I kind of
Yeah.
made the leap, and then I dove into freight, which I thought it was exciting. We're working with a lot of great freight companies, both here in the U.S. but also globally. But first of all, most of all, I kind of got the opportunity to get to know the freight community, which has been amazing. It's been great. People are so
Amazing
nice. They
community.
kind of
Yeah.
wanna teach you how, kind of you get to learn the ropes, and people are happy to kind of okay, this is our struggles. This is kind of what we're facing, and really opening up. So it's been a great experience.
No, yeah, the freight community is a really amazing community. They're very welcoming and definitely want to help and share their experiences and help you grow and nurture kind of your new experiences to what you're doing. So you spent how long were you in kind of that manufacturing tech space?
Oh, the tech manufacturing space has been so before that I was on oil and gas, and then I transitioned into
Oh wow.
manufacturing. So it's been a journey going over for it's 15 years now. We're ballparking that, so we're
Wow.
getting old.
Well, man, hey, you don't look it at all. So I would have ballparked you at my age. I'm 31, so I would have thought you were closer to my age.
A little bit
No,
over that,
that's
but yeah, I appreciate it. It's nice.
no,
Thanks.
no, of course, no, of course, no. That's fantastic, man. So you've had a lot of time to kind of grow in that manufacturing and kind of learn a lot of kind of what those needs are in terms of what manufacturers and kind of what shippers also kind of ultimately face in terms of some of
Yeah.
their ultimate struggles internally, not so much maybe on the freight demand side, but internally kind of what they struggle with on a day-to-day basis. So how do you think that kind of, that kind of prepped you for where you are today and what you're doing with Powerhouse AI and the freight side? Because there are so many issues that plague shippers. So how do you bring some of those experiences over to what you're doing at Powerhouse today?
So I think like a lot of that has to do with like the last couple of years and how that has changed the freight industry and the warehouse
Mm,
industry. And what I mean by that is like you had COVID and then you had everything associated with the supply chain challenges that came after COVID and how that kind of changed the landscape a little bit. So you had like the digitalization wave that was happening during COVID, like manufacturers, like the mom and pop stores, they were selling their goods more and more online, right, to make
mm,
the kind of wheels go around. And that changed distribution in a way that people are more open to adapting technology to then reach a new audience, right, or reach a new target market. And then
yeah.
as a consequence to that, you got this impact on the supply chain, which again impacted. Then you have other factors like global factors, like geopolitical factors that kind of like also had their impact on the supply chain. But I think all in all, you had this wave of digitalization, so people were more open to trying out technology and making changes. And then you have the supply chain issues that are kind of like making shippers, warehouses, they are changing how they're looking at how to secure their supplies,
Yeah.
how to change their supply chain, maybe more focus on nearshoring, right? You have this huge growth now in the Mexican market and how that's kind of like changing the whole freight industry in the like US, Mexico, Canada, which is super exciting. So I think that's a good combination. And then on top of that, you have all these new platforms like ChatGPT, Google has their turn that has
Yeah.
really added a lot of interesting technology that again is kind of changing the landscape. So to kind of sum it all up, I think there's a lot of factors that's been happening over the last couple of years that has kind of pushed this whole sector into this innovation where there's a lot of cool companies coming up with some super exciting technology that's kind of like making things more automated, making things more
Yeah.
efficient. It's very exciting.
Yeah, no, I mean, just the way, from I had a conversation, Henrik, with Matt Fain, the CEO of Pop Capacity recently, and we were talking about kind of just how that change has happened over the last couple of years in terms of a lot of driving factors in terms of how even you can find manufacturing space and you can find warehousing space in 2024 as opposed to, in 2019. And it really goes to show kind of how this technology and a lot of people are utilizing kind of like what that Airbnb style model is to kind of reach out to
Yeah.
more people in terms of trying to find more warehousing, trying to find this or that, or with trailer rentals and things like that. There's so many cool adaptions we're making in the space over the last few years. COVID really pushed, I think, freight to have to innovate and have some of those
Yeah.
technology changes that we haven't really seen. So that's kind of why I'm so excited to talk to you today, and more kind of about like the current state of warehousing and kind of AI in the space. So you guys live and breathe this every day. What is the current state of warehousing? Like, what are you guys seeing in the market right now? And where do you think, like, in terms of that, how can you maybe use some of those factors to kind of see, okay, is this going to impact the overall freight market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think kind of like what we're seeing now is that you have, or just 2 years ago, you had a lot of interesting companies like AutoStore, right, that provided full automation to a warehouse, which was just game changer, right, for
Yeah,
providing that automation. And there was like similar systems to that. So there's kind of been this drive of making things more efficient and streamline the whole warehouse operation. And as a result of that, I think that also have kind of driven smaller players, us included, to kind of come up with maybe niche things that we can optimize, like that we can kind of like find our kind of like place in the sun, right?
yeah,
What's interesting is that you have with that drive and that kind of like specter of innovation, you have also then more affordable solutions because you get
Mm.
access to technology, and you bring about like functionalities or platforms that are more affordable, more competitive, right? Because that's America. That's like you have to kind
Yeah.
of find way to like drive innovation, become competitive, and come with a product that people would want to buy, right? So that's, I think recently what we've seen is that you have all these smaller companies that are now enabling and providing other smaller companies that might not have the cash or the resources to get an auto store, right, or something similar, but
Mm.
still wants to have innovation in their warehouse, right? So you get access to more affordable platforms that has very much like the latest in technology. It's just more affordable and more flexible. It's more accessible. I think that's exciting right now.
Yeah, I think that I think you're spot on. I think that that's definitely one of the key, factors into how fascinating this technology is and how fascinating the tide is changing in terms of adding a lot of this new tech. Now, I wanted to talk more about some of like AI in warehousing. It's kind of like the
Sure.
main thing, the main crux of our conversation. So, how has over the last few years, and we kind of talked about this a little bit early on, is how has some of this AI in warehousing in general, how has this kind of changed the industry over the last few years, and where do you think AI is headed for some of these companies? Because a lot of companies, I was talking with someone recently, a lot of companies are using kind of the off the shelf models, the off the shelf GPTs. How do you
Yeah.
think that this is going to change as time goes on? Do you think that they're going to start developing some of their own like GPT models and things like that instead of using off the shelf once some of that tech becomes a little bit more affordable? Are you overwhelmed by permits and expiring documents? Digital Permit Book can streamline your compliance process and save you tons of time. Organize all of your documents, drivers, and vehicles in one central location. Automatic expiry notifications ensure you never miss a deadline, and effortless collaboration tools keep your entire team on the same page. Stop wasting time on paperwork and focus on getting the job done. Visit digitalpermitbook.com today and say goodbye to compliance chaos.
Oh no, I think that's already happening. You have
Mm.
LLM models that's coming that are more niche based. We do that ourselves. Like we have our own niche based LLM models
Yeah.
that are way more focused on exactly what we are trying to like solve and the
Yeah.
type of data that we want to process. And that is because these bigger platforms are making them available, right? So it's that is really
Yeah.
driving the opportunity for other companies to then build upon what's already been done, right?
Mm.
And about making those like when we're talking about like LLM, and I'm not an expert, but when we're talking about making that more accessible and having companies kind of taking advantage and building their own, I think what you will then see is that you'll have the ability to run and process data um, on smaller devices because you can
Mm.
become more niche, right? So you have like some of the new Pixel phones right now. You can run pretty much. You can run like a complex LLM model using that as using the Android and the Pixel as the platform, and then you can process a lot of data. And what that does is that it enables you to work and provide instant verification on data points that you want to verify. So just to give you an example, um,
Please.
so we work with like container terminals, right? Like you have like bigger ones like Long Beach, for example, where
Right.
you have these the people that might not be that aware is like when you're operating in a freight terminal, like within the containers, there's actually very little Wi-Fi access, let
Mm.
alone even getting cellular network access, like in that environment. So you're kind of like you can't rely on pushing data and then using a chat GPT based model that are cloud based to then verify and cross reference the information that you're seeing on the dock, right? So
Yeah.
that's when you get these more locally based, device based, smaller LLM models that can do that on the phone. So the scenario would be like, let's say you're using an
Mm.
RFID scanner to capture the container ID. And what you want to do then is like you want to cross-reference that container ID against custom documentation, right? And then once you identify the container, you can then open up the container and then you can then cross-reference the content of that container against the custom documentation in real time, right? And you'll be able to then take
Mm.
action if something doesn't correspond with what should be there and what's actually there. Just like a year ago, that wasn't able, you couldn't do that. You would have to then go back, get online, and then verify, or it would have to be a pen and paper kind of like
Right.
process, which is then you have like the human error issues coming in. You have it's just not as reliable compared to what you can kind of get today.
Yeah, no, and
Not sure if
I
that
think, you know,
answered your question about AI, but
no, I think that was really. I think it's interesting because you know you got the technology is advanced, like you said, so rapidly that even some of the things that is capable today wasn't capable a year ago, and honestly, I think that kind of that use case really highlights kind of some of those advancements and how we're kind of see even more rapid, I think, deployment, but also integration across the board.
yeah,
Not just at terminals, but I think brokers are going to be utilizing a lot of this technology for certain elements, especially if they are 3PLs and they do have warehousing spaces and things like that. But there's a lot of ways you can use AI and GPT models to help your operations, regardless. So I think that's a really fun and interesting like way the industry is shaping to
yeah.
go.
I have one thing that's also kind of like interesting about that because even though this is
Yeah,
like
please.
completely new technology, right? The user still comes with the expectation that if I take a picture of something and I want to cross-reference that with like a document or something, I would want to have an instant verification, even though the operation of actually doing that cross-referencing is pretty complex. The user still
Yeah,
assumes that, oh, I'll just take a photo and then it's going to let me know, okay, this works or this is correct or this is not correct, which which in itself is like kind of crazy that that's the expectation, but that's the reality. So
yeah.
yeah,
It's the instant gratification world we've come to
yeah,
live in and love. So everything is right at our fingertips with our phone, and kind of like what you said is bringing some of these models and being able to have it right at your fingertips and being able to have those real time verifications, because that is what people want. That is what people are really coming to
yes,
expect. And in 2024, there are ways now that we can really make some of these make them a reality. So I want to switch gears just a little bit, because I think that you know what you guys are doing at Powerhouse, and we're gonna dive into that in a second. But I like kind of what you guys are all about, because it's all about like turning your warehouse into a powerhouse. It's all about integrating AI and enhancing your operations. So let me ask you this: let's dive into Powerhouse a little bit. What is Powerhouse AI? What are you guys kind of doing, and how are you guys kind of changing warehousing?
sure. So we're a vision AI technology company, which is a fancy word, but basically,
That sounds
uh,
like a bunch of buzzwords. What, Henrik?
exactly.
What does that
I
mean?
hate
What
that.
does it
Yeah,
mean?
I hate that.
The
But
marketing
basically,
team came up with that. So
yeah,
what
exactly.
is Powerhouse?
So basically, very like very high level, like what like Vision AI does specifically for us is that our application kind of lets you see and understand pictures or videos that you take with your phone or with your Zebra scanner or with your Honeywell scanner, right? And
Mm,
it kind of works like the way the humans do, so that you take a photo and then you analyze it and you make sense of that information that you're capturing. And what's the AI kind of comes into play is that it's constantly learning, right? And it gets better over
mm,
time. And you have like techniques like learning that kind of makes that happen. Um, so I guess there's a lot of AI that you can kind of talk about when it comes to warehousing. Um,
yeah.
I think what we do is when it takes like power your warehouse, that is again one of those like marketing phrases, catchphrases. Uh, but what we're really doing is we're creating data. We're making data digitally
Mm.
for you. So that could be, for example, let's say you have a warehouse with a lot of pallets that has boxes on it, and you don't really have any information on those pallets. Like you have your SKU for the pallet, and you have a location number, right? But maybe you want to have information on the dimension of the box, the layer configuration
Mm.
on your pallet. So the first thing we do is basically just build out your data set by taking photos of the pallets, then remembering those box dimensions, that layer configuration of the pallet against that SKU. And then for next time, you will then have that already. So by creating a data set, you can then easily do cycle count later. You could do inbound, and then you can do like outbound. So it's making sense of your data, I guess, for your warehouse. And to
Yeah.
kind of give you an example, um, it's let's say you have a lot of let's say you're a warehouse. You have a warehouse. You're a manufacturer, right? And you have a lot
Yeah.
of suppliers, and all these suppliers have their own label. And if you've been in
Oh yeah.
the assembly space or manufacturing space, it's not necessarily that they're going to share this label to you digitally. You're probably going to just receive it, and then if you're lucky, you have a SKU that you can scan off. But I would say 50-50 don't have SKUs. So a good example of what you would use our technology for is basically you can take a picture of any label. Like we don't need to have seen it before. You can then pull the information that you want to pull from that label and cross-reference that with what's in your WMS. So basically, okay, what information do we already have for this SKU
Mm.
and what do we need? And then you can, for example, kick off a new label by just printing it through a Bluetooth. So you're like on the dock, take a picture of that label, and then you just like click OK, and then you kick off a new label that is then compliant with your internal label template. So
Mm.
you kind of like create sense, right? You make
Yeah.
outside label and documentation work with your own in system so that once it's from the front door, you can use your own barcode scanners to scan and everyone recognizes the label, has your own template, your logo, and everything.
That sounds very, very intuitive. So how easy is it for, like, if I was a warehouse that was, or I was a moving warehouse, or I was a newer warehouse, existing warehouse, and I wanted to set this up to help streamline. How easy is it to set up? How quick is it? How is that setup process for the end user?
So it's pretty, and because it's an app, it comes
Okay.
on, yeah, it's on your phone. It's like an app. So you log in with your user. So that in itself is super easy and super straightforward.
Yeah.
And then there's ways that you can kind of make shortcuts. So if you don't want to
Mm.
do anything, you just like, okay, I want to generate, let's say I want to capture box counts on pallets that I get on my inbound, right? And then I want to run cycle
Right.
count on those boxes, those pallets in my warehouse. Yeah, that's great. Then what you do then is just start taking photos. Every time you get a new pallet inbound, you just have to take two photos, one from each side and on the label. And then the system will then learn and recognize that for later. But in the scenario
Mm.
where you actually have a label configuration on a SKU, like if you have a single SKU palette and you have the label configuration already, if you give that to us, then the system will already recognize that, and you can just take one photo of that palette, and we can tell you how many boxes and what the quantity of each individual piece is inside those boxes are, without having to do any form of training. So that's really what it comes down to, is that if you want to
Hmm.
provide us with information and data, it shortens down the time the AI needs to train to your environment. But if you don't want to do that and you're willing to kind of let the AI train, then you can just download the app and sign in.
Now, are you guys app based only, or can you also go from the web, or do you guys have like Mac and Windows apps? How does that work?
Oh, we're just Android based, so we can run on
Just
any
Android, okay.
Android device. And we're dabbling, like we work with some drone operating companies. For example,
That's interesting.
we have a project in Scandinavia because we really just we process information that we see in an image, right?
Yeah,
So in that case, they would basically use drones to run cycle counts overnight, and then they would just push those images to us, and then we would extract the information and verify it against their WMS system. And then once they come in the morning, well, they'll have a report of the drone cycle count that have been running then down, up and down all these like lanes of warehousing, right? And they'll say like, okay, this location ID, there's an issue here. There's a product that's not supposed to be there. So we do that too.
that's really interesting. So how often are you guys doing projects like that where you guys are utilizing kind of like drone technology to help, like, I guess kind of like what you said, to be able to say, hey, that like overnight be able to run this and not have to have it impede kind of your day to day operations until kind of you kind of have to correct things in the morning, or just
Yeah,
make sure that things are as is.
we do that a lot. It really comes down to the warehouse because
Yeah,
you would have to, and it's actually it's really cool because there's so many when it comes about talking about hardware. Yeah, you have drones, which has kind of been around for a little bit, but
yeah,
if like I know we didn't go to Modex, but I know a bunch of companies that went to Modex that has like picking machines, right? That
yeah,
like
yeah,
will run around on in a warehouse and do picking, and it's all like automatic, right? And you can partner up with those kind of platforms where the images that you take from the camera on that picking machine, you can
yeah.
verify that against using our technology against like what's in your WMS system and get that instant verification. So you can have robots basically run cycle count for you. Doesn't need to be drones. It could be trucks, like lifts.
Yeah.
And then you just basically set and forget. And then the only time you need to like take action is if the application tells you something is off. The count is off compared to what it should be in your WMS system. And then the person can then go over and then view and then check.
Wow. So it really seems like the technology is still so new, but like it's advanced so far to where it's taken a lot of the kind of that human error element out of it, because
Yeah.
now you don't have to have, myself as a dyslexic person, I routinely would transpose numbers. And that was my biggest like fatal flaw, is like I worked at a shipper for like 9 months, and we would go out and do cycle counts on steel, and I would
Right.
routinely have to double, triple, and quadruple check, because I was sure that the number was 400, but realistically it was, or 458, and it was really
Yeah.
558. So it's very easy to make those kind of errors. So it really takes a lot of that human mistake out of it, and really makes things a lot more efficient within your operations. And like I said, just a second ago, you don't have to disrupt your day-to-day operations to do these things. It can run on an automatic cycle, to where if you guys close at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., it can start running right after that, to make sure that things are the way they should be, exactly matching what you may have shipped or moved out that day, and things can correlate properly. So I think that's really really interesting, in how fast kind of that technology has moved. Where do you kind of see some of this tech advancing to over the next 1 to 3 years, and kind of what is Powerhouse looking for in terms of some of like scaling some of your operations, but also advancing some of the AI capabilities?
So I think speed is going to be the next, and what I mean by speed is that uh, all these more niche based LLM models running on devices will enable the user to get instant verification on complex calculations, which is going to be, I think that's going to be a huge change because, as you're saying like earlier, they want the instant kind of like gratification of like, okay, like, can I take action, right? Having said that,
Yeah.
I think one of a lot of the cool things, and we were talking about a little bit about freight, right, and moving freight and shippers.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like an LTL carrier. That our scenario is that you're a manufacturer using an LTL freight company, and then as a freight company, as the carrier, you're getting 16 pallets, right? And it's all
Right.
mixed pallets. And one of the things that we know from manufacturers, it's always the issue is that the end receiver of that pallet is going to say, no, I didn't get 14, I got 16, or I didn't get the quantity that I was supposed to get, right?
Right.
And you get this like he said, she said, right? And you can have people scanning the barcode and like, yeah, that's all great, but that will take more time to verify the quantity that's being delivered. And the
Right.
technology, what you can do now is basically you can still take a picture of that pallet, which is a mixed pallet, and you can then cross-reference that in real time on the loading dock of that location, that restaurant or whatever it might be. And then you can timestamp it, you can GPS locate it, and then you can kind of like, okay, I have an image telling me that 14 packs of concrete was delivered at this location, 18 boxes of cement, and it was this brand, right? And all those things, I think, going to have an impact when it comes to like LTL shipping. It's one aspect that I think is going to change a lot, which will enable people to get a lot of clarity and will take away some of the like ifs and no, we didn't get that delivered. Yeah, you did get that delivered.
Yeah, I think that can be highly utilized in a lot of those LTL situations for sure, because you are dealing with a lot of miscellaneous pallets, and they're moving from place to place, right? Like you could pick up 5 or 6 pallets from one shipper, but they may be going to Maine, Texas,
Yeah.
Arizona, Washington, and California, and so you just need to be able to know and have kind of those streamlined operations, and to be able to kind of be very easily able to tell your customer, hey, no, I'm sorry, like we actually delivered 14 pallets. 14
Right.
pallets were picked up, 14 pallets were delivered. Here's kind of that transactional flow. You can kind of show that flow. I'm sure there's ways to be able to say, hey, this is what we picked up. Here's a GPS image. Here's what we dropped off, GPS image. Do these match in your eyes? Yes. Okay, well, then I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It was all dropped off. It's somewhere in your yard or someone stole it, but we're kind of off the hook. So, no, I think that's a really really interesting way, and definitely I think speed is definitely in all ways going to impact and going to be kind of the way of how these models operate going forward, because it's kind of, even today, if you were to use one of these models in any capacity, it takes a few seconds to think, right? Like you're not getting an instantaneous result, which still is really capable and still really fantastic, but like you said, as that time kind of goes on over the next year to three years, we're going to see that kind of be an instantaneous result. As soon as you hit enter or hit press send, you're going to have an instantaneous result or an instantaneous message back or answer to what you're trying to figure out. So I think there's a lot of really interesting advancements that are going to be made over the next few years. And kind of the last thing I want to end on, Henrik, and I think it's kind of ties into what we talked about, but it's more tied into the freight side. What are you most bullish about in freight for the rest of 2024?
In freight?
Yeah, in freight or even in AI. I think either one could be really, really interesting, or both.
So freight, I know there's 90% of the people listening into this podcast knows more about freight than I do. So I want to like tread lightly. I think there's other people there that like, okay, this is what's going on. This is where the technology is heading, and there's probably a lot of smart technology companies that are working on this right now. I think when it comes to AI, I think just overall, I think because of technology is more accessible now, it becomes more affordable, and that will enable more smaller companies to get access to the latest in technology. And what that does is like it levels the playing field, right? It
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
makes people more competitive. You don't have to have a lot of investments in order to get the latest tech to have automation or to be able to process data in like an instant using your phone, right? It's all accessible, and I
Yeah.
think that's really cool because that will bring in these more agile, smaller companies that are doing freight, for example, that get access to this technology that all the bigger guys have, but I get it to the fraction of the cost, and I can do as efficient and accurate operation as they do, but I can be more agile. I can compete with them on other things, like I can be better on customer
Yeah.
service, and I think that can change the freight game. You're getting these like new companies that can come through and take advantage of that, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that that's a really interesting aspect and a really fun aspect to it because, as someone who came from a smaller brokerage a while back, you having some of this tech and some of these tools that kind of can help level that playing field. It can make the difference between whether you're going to win a shipment or not win a shipment,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
whether you're gonna grow year over year or you're not going to grow year over year. So, no, I really really appreciate your time, Henrik. I appreciate you coming on the show and talking more about AI and Powerhouse AI and kind of what you guys are doing. If people are listening and they want to find Powerhouse AI and want to learn more, or they just want to follow you and kind of see what you're doing, where can people find you guys?
Just go to powerhouseai.com.
Perfect. We'll have everyone's links in the comments. We'll have, if you want to link up with Henrik as well, we'll have his LinkedIn. If you guys like today's podcast, make sure you guys leave a like and review wherever that makes sense. And don't forget, we do drop newsletters on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 days a week, thinkfreight.io. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Don't forget to think freight.